Video discusses how to use the Dynamic Number Insertion tool on your landing page using PHP code. So the first step you have to do excuse me, in your offer is to go to your Optimizer tokens, and this is the information we're going to look for to automatically populate your numbers with token values. So this left-hand column here is going to be what URL keys we're looking for in the query string and what tokens we're going to store them in over here. So you can do whatever you'd like. By default, we've set up these ones for you, so you can look for S or sub ID to stick in sub ID, A or traffic source ID to go in traffic source IDs. You can look for the browser, landing page, operating system, and then usually the tracking variables that people will resort to are S1 through S5. Now if you had an ad network perhaps that can't send S1 equals keyword, whatever it is, they have to send in keyword equals keyword. If you didn't want to have a token in the system called keyword because it's only for that one traffic source, you could look for keyword here and then tell it that you're trying to store that in the S1 token. So I prefer to keep my tokens limited so I'm not all over the place trying to figure out what's going on. I just know that this is the broadest token I'm going to track. For example, maybe a campaign, and then ST2 under that is a keyword group, and then S3 under that is actually the keyword or something. So the further I go down in my tokens from S1 through S5 is the more refined I'm trying to optimize my offer. So that's where you get the how we know what to look for. And there's an additional way to add tokens from the code as well. And then at the top here again we have the optimizer here, and this is a really basic version of how you can get it working. It just says that's your key. You need to go here to get this file TrackDrive.php. You upload it to your website. You have to include this in your code so that it has our source code to do this. And then this right here would show a TrackDrive number using the secret key here. So pretty simple, but I'm going to show you an example of how I'm using it in some source code here. So that's the first step, is to make sure that your offer has the URL tokens you want us to look for in the query string and where you want to store them in TrackDrive. Step 2 is going to be that you need a number pool, of course. So I've already created a number pool for this student loan consolidation deal, and that's all you really need to know here, is that you need a number pool or it won't have any numbers that it can pull together. I also have a default number that I created, and that number is for this offer, and it's the traffic source is Google AdWords, and on the extra tokens I have set S1 to a value that I know that when this number is actually used, I'm not actually tracking what I'm trying to track because my pool doesn't have enough numbers in it, or maybe the PHP call timed out or whatever. It's just saying that it didn't use the pool. It had to use a static number for this traffic source. So what that's all about. So I'm going to go to my source code here. Now typically I always just have the same source code up top. My goal is to get the plain number for hyperlinking and the number for the formatted number display. And you can see I'm just placing in my key from that offer in my default plain number here and my default formatted number here that I had set up for this. Now I've done a bunch of extra stuff. All you really need, you don't even need additional tokens. Now what I've done is I've forced some tokens here. So you can force in, I forced in the landing page is demo PHP number page so that I know that that's where it was. So you might have, blue screen page, or in a red screen page, or little girl on dad's lap page, and happy family page, whatever you're trying to do to identify the landing page. Now I've commented out here, so it's not tracking that, the operating system in the browser. But if you'd like to track that, you would just uncomment these lines. If you do add additional things like for the student loan offer, maybe I have a form and the person has said that they're still in school, and I'm going to send the token in for still in school and set the value to still in school based from the form field. You just have to make sure that your last token that you're trying to force in The last one doesn't have a comma after it, so that's why I put these two above so you could comment them out, and you'll see I do have the comma already sitting there. So if you do add some more tokens, I just insert them in between, but just make sure there's no comma after that. Now down here is the options, and I'm saying, hey, I'm looking for plain number, and the default number is this. Then I make the call to TrackDrive to get the plain number using the options and the tokens. And then down here I'm going to do it again and get the number. Now I do an encoded number as well, converted to base 64 in case I want to pass the number between landing pages. For example, normally, and then I'm picking up a few fields that I can use elsewhere, the parameters and the user agent and such. So anyway, I do have in here, which you don't need, I'm getting the operating system here. Don't have to do that because you can get it from TrackDrive here as well. But this version here, I'm just doing it in the screen here, so I'm going to figure out the version, and I'm also going to go ahead and get the browser version stuff, and then I set up these variables. Now if I was trying to redirect from my index page to, let's say, chrome/index.php, and then another one firefox/index.php, whatever, that's why I put in here the redirect area. And if I was trying to do it, I would uncomment this, and if the browser is Chrome, I'm going to load Chrome with the URL encoded number and the rest of the query string that I saw. Else I'm going to load the Firefox version, and of course you could have a bunch of else ifs here and handle all the browsers you're doing. Ultimately, the last one I'd leave it to default to whatever you like best. So that's what I'm doing here. I've commented all this out because I'm not really trying to redirect, and I'm writing some code here for you below. So that's that. Down here is my actual code, so I'm just showing you some examples of an unlinked number, one that's hyperlinked, and using those variables. Now when you do pass, you see I'm passing the URL encoded number here. I have this text I did at the very beginning of the programs, like the chrome/index.php or the firefox/index.php. The first lines of code that you'll want to do is to pick up the parameters, and if you're going to reload the page perhaps at any time, like I'm loading firefox/index2.php, I say that the reload is the same page and pick up the parameters as well. So that's why I pick those up. And the encoded number I get out of in, which I passed in, and then I decode it here. So now I have the number formatted again. And if I needed to use the IP, I go ahead and pick up the IP address. And then my code would appear here, and I'd be able to do PHP replacements of like number and IP. Even pass an encoded number to a login or something like that. So that's what that's all about here. So back to my example. Now down here, I've just done some code here to show these different styles here. So that's right here. I've already done this. So you'll see my query string here is, this is the path, index example PHP question mark. The first part of that is the path to the landing page, and then the question mark is your query strings, and then of course you have your first field equals the field value, and second field equals field value, and you'll see here I intentionally left S2 blank because I'm not currently tracking that. Now the gclid ID from Google AdWords, I didn't tell TrackDrive to look for that. So I'm only telling it that I want it to track the traffic source and S1, and eventually I'll also send in S2. And since I told the offer only to look for those things, it'll ignore the gclick ID as part of what it's going to attribute to the phone number that's going to when you call. What TrackDrive does is it's going to keep track of everything in an impressions table, so that when we go to interface back to Google AdWords, we don't want to rotate numbers based on this unique field. If you had a ton of traffic, 20,000 clicks an hour, there wouldn't be enough numbers to track all that. You would rotate out of your numbers, and your pool would be unavailable, and it'd keep showing the default number, and you'd lose your tracking. So what you want to do is you want to limit to very specific stuff that you want TrackDrive to actually keep track of, and then our impressions table will keep any additional information we see in the URL. And then if you did need a field in a webhook back to either a ad network or to Google AdWords or whatever, we're going to read the impressions table, find the matching A value, S1 value, and if you had S2 value, we'll limit the table to just those ones. We'll use some algorithm, secret algorithm, to figure out one that's probably the closest, and we'll grab any click ID and get that back to Google AdWords. So at least what you're trying to track is informed back to Google AdWords properly. We will then delete that entry out of the table so that we don't reuse that click ID. Now, if you had to send more stuff back to Google, that click ID that we used for the post back would also be attributed to the call that took that entry out of the impressions table. So that's the fancy how we're going to use less numbers but still be able to update people by click ID. So anyway, we got this number 0611. Now if I go look at my numbers, I've already filtered this, you'll see, to the ring pool. I have more numbers in here, but I told it to filter, which you can do just by clicking on search, and I told it to only filter for that deal there. So these are my numbers. So that number was 0611. So if I look, hover over the tokens, I see that it has LP demo PHP number page. That came from the source code. I forced LP as a token in the tokens array, and then it found S1 is what I had set in the URL, but you see it did not pick up the gclid because the offer didn't say to do so. So I'm going to go back to this example here, and I'm going to give S2 a value, demo on 180414. Press enter there. Okay, so it gives me a new number, 272. So when I go back to the numbers and I refresh here, now it gave me that number 272, and when I mouse over that, you see that I now have S2 also, and I did demo on, didn't do an underscore, sorry, but that's the value. So the way this all functions is that numbers are attributed with values. When that number is called, the call that is taken by TrackDrive, all the attributes that are on the number are going to become attributes or token values on the call. And that's how we do our optimizations. So now when I go to analytics, and this is delayed a little bit, we cache this information because some people do send quite a bit of information. But I can go get analytics in the Advertising Optimizer, and I've been playing around with the HTML version today as well. So I'm going to click on Google AdWords, and then I'm going to expand to the S1 token. Okay, so now I can see that I've had some impressions, my HTML version, which was the video earlier today, and my PHP version. So I've had 3 impressions, and I was able to display 3. Now what happens is if it can't display a number because the pool is full, and in this situation I had a bug in my code, so it showed the default number because it didn't know what I was asking for. Usually you're going to have 100% if your pool size large enough. 100% of your numbers are able to show. But if your PHP is timing out, your server makes a request and it's not doing it, or TrackDrive's not responding fast enough, or whatever, the pool is full, your default number may show, and that's when you know if your impressions displayed is less than the ones requested, you know something might be wrong. Maybe the pool's too small, or maybe you need to talk to your hosting company about your number of PHP requests you can make because it's not happening fast enough. But the most important thing here is as calls start happening, we're going to show you your impressions per call. And that's where you're going to be able to figure out, you have this combination of S1 equals this, for that S1 equals this, and it had 20,000 impressions and only 2 calls, but then you get S1 equals another value, had 300 impressions and 10 calls. You will know that you better not bid on that one. You might have some that have impressions with no calls. That probably means your ad network is sending bots to your traffic. It's not going to work very well. You can also then drill down to the S2 values as well under that. So we will do any combination of things you do. So you see I just changed that to demo on 180414, and you see I got 1 impression and it did display it. I have no calls yet, so I don't have my impressions per call. So you can see that I just changed that and it tracked that impression. So this is the different colors show what it's got going on there. Okay, and that's that. I accidentally had, I'm sorry, never mind. I'd done a bunch of testing with S2 on earlier, that's why that's there. So that's how that functions in our Advertising Optimizer and how it ties into using our PHP script on TrackDrive.